Greetings. Before I begin this story, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel so that you do not miss new stories about the Wild West, about courage, betrayal, love and sacrifice. Your comments and likes help me find new stories and share them with you. Now get ready. Today you will hear a story about forbidden love, about how a cowboy and a girl from an Indian tribe defied fate and enemies, defied the very world that did not want them together. This is a story about people who were separated by the boundaries of blood and customs, but united by danger and the desire to be free. The story is that even in the ruthless land of the Wild West, the heart is able to choose its path, no matter what. The sun of the Wild West knew no mercy. It burned the earth to cracks, turned rivers into narrow strands of dirty water and left deep wrinkles on people's faces, as if carved with a knife. The wind blew dust across the endless plains, and every step of the horse lifted dry clouds that hung in the air for a long time, like the spirits of dead warriors. Here, life was measured not by years, but by struggles for survival, and every dawn could be the last. These lands were a field of endless confrontation. The settlers moved further and further west, bringing their families, building houses and putting up fences, believing that they owned the land. Indian tribes saw this as an invasion and loss of what had been their home for hundreds of years. There was no trust between them, and any meeting could end in blood. Even a simple glance, a casual word, or a step in the wrong direction often turned into a reason for violence. Tension hung in the air as heavily as the summer heat. People lived cautiously, as if each of them was waiting for a stab in the back. At night, the screams of coyotes and volleys of gunfire could be heard in the distance, and during the day, even in a small settlement, one could feel that the world was on a fragile edge. No one could be sure that they would live to see the next day. It was the West, wild, ruthless and honest in only one thing: it did not forgive weakness. In the midst of these merciless lands, there lived a girl whose fate was as broken as the withered trees on the plain. Ayana was known throughout her tribe, but she was known with disdain and caution. She was different. Since childhood, she could not accept that every step of her life should be determined by rules and customs. When the other girls obediently followed the instructions of their elders, Ayana went to the river and watched for hours as the water receded into the distance, as if looking for an answer where no one else was looking. There was a thirst for freedom in her heart, a thirst to see and know more than the laws of the tribe allowed. She asked questions that weren't supposed to be asked, and her gaze too often strayed beyond the horizon to a world that was considered alien and hostile. It caused fear and irritation. The elders said that she had a rebellious spirit that would lead to trouble. The women turned away when she passed by, and the men looked at her suspiciously, as if she could betray them at any moment. But she couldn't find a place among the white settlers either. To them, she was just a savage, an outsider with dark eyes and a proud face. On the streets of the settlement, she was met with looks full of hostility and ridicule. She could hear whispers behind her back that she could steal, cheat, or lead an entire tribe of avengers. And every time her bare feet touched the ground, she felt like she wasn't welcome here either. Ayana lived between two worlds, and both rejected her. Sometimes she thought that the land of the West itself was closer to her than people. The wind understood her longing, and the setting sun seemed to whisper that even exiles have the right to their own way. But the question persisted in my soul: if there is no home in either the tribe or the settlement, then where does it belong? This thought wouldn't let go of her day or night. She was afraid to admit even to herself that she was increasingly looking at the road, the one that led away from the familiar world. If Ayana lived between two worlds and couldn't find a place in them, then James seemed to have lost his world altogether. He was once a soldier. Young and full of energy, he believed in the oath, believed that he was defending justice. But the war on the border quickly showed him a different truth. He saw how settlements burned to the ground, how entire families disappeared in one night, and how meaningless the words of the commanders sounded against the background of crying children. The brutality was etched deeper into his memory than any wound. He learned to shoot faster than others, but with each shot his soul became heavier. When he couldn't give the order anymore, when his conscience screamed louder than the command, he left. He just took off his military jacket and didn't come back. Now James was working on a ranch, but every day seemed empty to him. The sun rose, he saddled a horse, grazed cattle, repaired fences, and everything happened again. From the outside, he looked strong and reliable, and people respected him for his ability to keep his word and for his steady hand. But deep down, he remained a stranger among his own people. The neighbors did not understand his silence, did not ask unnecessary questions, but also did not seek to get closer. James forced himself into this loneliness. He knew that once someone entered his life, the past would come alive again, bringing pain again. So he kept everyone at a distance. In the evenings, when others gathered in the saloon, he went to the river or sat by the campfire alone. He remembered the faces of those whom he could not save, and asked himself the same question: why was all this? He could not find the answer. His life was like a deserted road stretching into infinity. People were walking next to him, but not with him. And somewhere deep inside, he has long since come to terms with the fact that his path is the path of a loner. Ayanna and James lived only a few days away from each other, but it seemed as if they were separated by whole worlds. She is rejected by her own tribe and hated by the settlers. He is a former soldier who left the army and lost all faith in justice. Their lives flowed in parallel, without intersecting, but both were colored by the same color: loneliness. Ayanna left the camp more and more often, wandering among the stones and dry grasses for a long time, as if hoping to find an answer in the silence of nature. The question sounded more and more strongly in her thoughts: if neither my own nor others are waiting for me, then should I stay here at all? Her heart was torn away, but every step aside meant a new stigma of exile. Meanwhile, James continued to do the monotonous work on the ranch day after day. His hands knew the weight of the rifle and shovel, but they did not know the warmth of someone else's shoulder. He found himself thinking that he was afraid to get close to anyone, because the past always reminded him that intimacy brings pain. Every evening he thought that he was living someone else's life, and more often he asked himself why he stayed on this earth at all. Their paths hadn't crossed yet, but it was as if fate itself was leading them towards it. Two people, each rejected by their own world, were supposed to meet where Earth was becoming particularly dangerous. On the border of the desert and the plains, where gangs were rampaging, where any horseman could turn out to be an enemy, where even the strong could not be sure that they would live to see the next day. Clouds were already gathering over this land. Increasingly, armed groups appeared on the roads, looting wagons and settlements. People whispered about a gang that knew no mercy and followed the wealth and blood. The rumors seemed far away, but the air was saturated with anxiety, and those who knew how to listen already understood that the calm here would not last long. And it is this threat that will become the force that will bring Ayanna and James together, forcing them to challenge not only their enemies, but also the world itself, which never wanted to see them around. Dust swirled over the sparse path, hiding in the light of the scorching sun, which reflected off the dry earth and burnt stone. The wind lifted light eddies of sand, rustling under the hooves of horses and cart wheels. The settlement on the edge of the desert seemed like a small oasis illusion: a few scattered huts, a cattle pen, smoke from rare fireplaces. There was a sense of anxiety in the air. The animals were nervously neighing and mooing, and the residents were holding their breath, looking out of the doors, as if they expected something worse. James stood next to the ranch fence, listening to the silence, broken only by the sound of the wind and the rustle of dry grasses. He could feel it almost physically, the tension that seemed to stretch the air before a thunderstorm. His eyes roamed the horizon, searching for any shadow, any movement that could portend trouble. Inside, he replayed his past encounters with gangs, his soldier skills, and worked out a plan of action in case of a surprise attack. But now the anxiety was different, not just a fight, but a feeling that this day would change something more than himself. Ayanna, hiding behind a rock to the side, watched the same scene through the eyes of the tribe and the stranger at the same time. Her heart beat faster when she saw people running around in confusion and felt the threat that was looming from the horizon. Fear and excitement mixed inside her, fear for people and herself, excitement from the upcoming action, the opportunity to intervene and have an impact where ordinary life seemed boring and limited to her. She knew that no one was waiting for her help, that her freedom and independence put her out of the familiar world again. Dark silhouettes of horsemen appeared on the horizon, a gang moving quietly but menacingly through the dust. Every movement caused a tremor, every sound was an alarm. James felt his heart constrict with apprehension, and his mind instantly adjusted to the danger. Who's first? Where's the shelter? How to protect the unarmed? Ayanna felt the same tension, but her thoughts were already paving the way for decisive action, for intervention where adults and adult decisions of people could not cope. There was an almost palpable silence in the air before the storm, when every moment could be the last. And in this tension, two people who had previously been separated by worlds and prejudices found themselves on the same line for the first time, ready to face the unknown, for the first meeting that would change their lives. The loud roar of horses and the grinding of wheels pierced the midday silence. The gang struck suddenly like a storm, bursting out of the dusty horizon. The horsemen, dressed in dirty leather and worn raincoats, shouted threats, brandished whips and revolvers. Their eyes glittered with ruthlessness, and their faces were hidden under shaded hats, as if they had come not for prey, but for fear. The residents of the settlement, who had not expected such fury, were taken aback. The women grabbed their children and hid behind logs, while the men screamed and rushed to the weapons they lacked. The panic grew, turning the calm street into chaos. Horses neighed and rushed, cattle ran away, the wind raised swirls of dust, mixed with screams and metallic ringing. James instantly felt his usual warrior instinct take over. Every step, every movement of his muscles, every glance is calculated and quick. He took his revolver out of its holster, checking the weapon with automatic precision, as if the years of service had suddenly come alive inside him. His eyes scanned the space. Who threatens the most? Who is unarmed? Where to move to minimize losses? My heart was beating steadily, but inside there was tension, adrenaline, a mixture of fear and concentration. He saw one of the bandits running up to a woman with a child, and an instant decided the outcome. James rushed to the side, trying to cut off the attacker's path, not thinking about his own safety. Every move was dictated by experience, every decision by an instant analysis of risk and opportunity. Images of past battles replayed in his head, comrades who had died from an accidental shot, the faces of the enemies he had defeated. Now it was all turning into one goal, to protect people who didn't even know his name and stop the chaos. Dust, blood, screams, everything was mixed up in a mad whirlwind. James tried to keep order in places where it seemed impossible to control events. A small voice sounded inside him, "Don't give up. No one should get hurt." This voice was not an order, but a law of conscience that he had formulated for himself. His gaze crossed with the desolate horizon, and he noticed a figure in the distance, the silhouette of a girl who walked through the chaos without stopping, as if she knew she had to be here. Ayanna moved precisely, deftly, without fear of the bulk of the horsemen. Her eyes fixed their targets, her hands were ready for action. She saw James and instantly assessed the situation, a lone defender surrounded by enemies, ready to die, but not to surrender. Respect and curiosity mixed inside her, and the thought that she could step in and change the outcome made the blood run faster through her veins. Every moment was crucial. James, despite his fatigue and the old wounds of his soul, felt that he could not act otherwise than to protect this helpless world. Ayanna, walking towards chaos, felt the same feeling. Strength and freedom require action, and passivity here is equal to death. And in this first clash of chaos, when the world seemed destroyed, two outcasts, each in their own way, were preparing for a fateful meeting that would change their lives and define what it means to be together in this dangerous and cruel world. James found himself in the middle of the chaos, like a single stone thrown into a raging river. Several bandits surrounded him from different directions, their faces disfigured by malice, their movements fast and precise. He saw their eyes, full of greed and violence, and understood that every wrong step could be the last. James' every move was calculated, but the numerical superiority of his opponents weighed on him like an invisible hand. He blocked punches, dodged whips, and tried to stay on his feet despite the dust, dirt, and heat. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my mind was working coolly, anticipating where the blows would be, when to shoot, when to retreat. His arms were tense, his muscles burned with fatigue, but fear, not fear of death, but fear of losing innocent people, forced him to move on. Memories of the war surfaced inside him, explosions, screams of comrades, the faces of the dead, random brutality. He understood that there was no strategy here other than a simple struggle for survival. Every shot, every step is a matter of life and death. He felt the pain in his shoulder from the whip, and he could hear the dust and gravel creaking and flying in all directions under his feet. Suddenly, he noticed movement from the side, the silhouette of a girl who quickly jumped out from under the rubble of cars. Ayanna moved with the precision of a hunter, her gaze focused, her hands gripping the knife tightly, which she used with amazing dexterity. She didn't shout or brandish a weapon, she just intervened, a quick step, and one of the attackers was knocked down, the other was stunned by her sudden attack. James felt a mixture of surprise and cautious respect. He had never seen this before, the calmness and precision hidden behind the dark-skinned face of a girl who was supposed to inspire fear, but instead attracted attention. He noticed how her hair was blowing in the wind, how her eyes were burning with determination. Not only did she save him, but she also changed the course of the battle. However, the threat has not disappeared. The bandits quickly recovered, regrouped, and James was in danger again. He knew he couldn't do it without Ayanna's help. His mind searched for ways out, evaluating each option. Retreat was impossible, holding a position was fatal. A feeling of helplessness grew inside, unusual for someone who was used to being strong and confident. He wasn't thinking about himself, he was thinking about the people around him, that if he fell, who would protect the innocent? And at that moment, he felt a quiet, almost imperceptible presence nearby, the strength and confidence he so lacked. Ayana was there, and her intervention gave him a chance that could change the outcome. Mixed feelings of anxiety and admiration filled his mind. James understood that this moment, this first contact, would be a turning point. He saw the girl not only as a savior, but also as a mystery that he wanted to solve. Her presence made his heart beat faster, and his mind remained at the limit of concentration, to survive, to protect, to understand. In this battle full of dust, screams and anger, James felt for the first time that he was not alone, that there was someone who shared danger with him, and perhaps something more, not only an alliance, but also an attraction that they had not yet fully understood. Dust billowed from the road, and a deafening commotion engulfed the settlement as James fought the bandits. Every blow, every step was given to him with tension, but his strength was fading by the minute. He understood that the numerical superiority of the enemies would soon make him defenseless. Suddenly, from around the corner of the hunched barn, she appeared, Ayana. Her swarthy face was focused, her eyes sparkling with determination. She moved with amazing agility, as if her body had merged with the environment. Every step is thought out, every attack is accurate. She used everything she could, dodging, quick stone throws, deft knife strikes, distracting the attackers. James barely had time to process what was happening. He saw how the bandits, accustomed to the fear and panic of ordinary residents, were taken aback by Ayana's courage and confidence. Her movements were lightning, fast, but at the same time natural, without unnecessary cruelty. She did not kill, she neutralized the threat. James felt a mixture of surprise and cautious admiration. He could feel his heart beating faster, not only from the danger, but also from the feeling that there was someone nearby who wasn't afraid to defy death. She didn't just interfere, she changed the outcome of the fight. Ayana used her knowledge of the area. She led the bandits through the narrow passages between the carriages, causing them to stumble, lose their balance, and disperse. Every step she took was calculated, every gesture was strategically correct. It was as if she controlled chaos, turning it into a survival tool. James realized that without her intervention, he would have already been injured or killed. A strange mixture of gratitude and mild embarrassment arose inside him. He was used to acting alone, relying only on himself, and here in front of him stood a girl who was not only not afraid, but also surpassed him in efficiency in this chaotic moment. There was no fear in her gaze, only determination. There was no panic in her movements, only confidence. She did not expect praise, she did not seek recognition, she simply acted, and by this action she saved not only him, but also the inhabitants of the settlement. James felt a strange closeness, even though they barely knew each other. A feeling flared up inside him that this girl was not an accident, that she would become a part of his life, even if he still did not understand how and why. Her presence gave him new strength, he could breathe again, he could fight again, and now he wasn't alone. The bandits began to retreat, confused and demoralized. Ayana disappeared as suddenly as she appeared, leaving behind only a light trail in the dust and an echo of determination. James remained standing in the midst of the chaos, feeling not only relief, but also attraction to this mysterious girl. Thoughts seethed inside him. Who was she? Why had she intervened? And what did their meeting mean? Everything around him continued to tremble with tension, but now hope sprang up in James' heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt that danger did not always come alone, that sometimes there might be someone nearby who changed the rules of the game. After the dust settled and the screams of the terrified residents subsided, James remained standing in the middle of the deserted square. My heart was still racing, and my hands were shaking with adrenaline. He realized that he was on the verge, and someone intervened, saving him. But who? Ayana reappeared, slipping quietly between the toppled crates. Her swarthy face was covered with a light layer of dust, and her hair was blowing in the wind. She watched James closely, studying his movements, assessing his reaction. He felt her gaze on him, a mixture of caution, inner analysis, and subtle interest. James tensed, feeling the familiar steel shield in his heart. He saw before him a wild woman, an Indian girl who had violated all the boundaries of what he considered familiar and safe. His inner voice immediately whispered, "Be careful, it's dangerous." But in his eyes, in addition to caution, there was a spark of surprise. She was surprisingly brave, and this surprise gradually turned into quiet respect. Ayana, in turn, was watching him warily. She knew that white people often posed a threat to her tribe, that trust could turn into pain. Her inner monologue was full of doubts. Why didn't he kill me? Why didn't he attack? Are they all like that? Anxiety and a strange curiosity were mixed in her chest. He wasn't like the others, and that immediately caught her attention. She took a few steps closer, but stopped at a safe distance, as if checking if he was ready for contact. James didn't take a step either, but his gaze softened. He understood that there was a spark of something new in this silent exchange of emotions: respect, surprise, a faint, barely noticeable sympathy. Their movements were careful, almost instinctive. James hunched his shoulders slightly, making it clear that he wasn't going to attack. Ayanna tilted her head slightly, as if assessing his intentions. This silent ritual lasted for several moments, during which they exchanged hundreds of unspoken words. A strange feeling appeared inside James. For the first time in a long time, there was a person next to whom he shouldn't pretend. He didn't have to hide his fears or vulnerability, because she'd already seen it, and she didn't turn away. He felt a faint, almost childish joy that someone was able to understand him without words. Ayanna, watching his eyes, began to discern in him not only strength, but also loneliness. Her heart squeezed a little with sympathy, but curiosity was stronger. She felt that this man was not as simple as he seemed. His silent presence attracted her, though she still couldn't figure out why. The moments of silence stretched out, but they both knew that this first contact was a turning point. The distrust remained, but now it was intertwined with curiosity and cautious respect. The world around them was still dangerous, but an invisible thread had formed between them, barely perceptible, but already strong. Inside James, there was a quiet inner monologue: she's not the enemy. Maybe this is the first time I'm not alone. Ayanna, watching him, thought, he's different from the others. But is it possible to trust? So, in a dusty, deserted settlement, on the border of two worlds, a silent mutual attraction arose, a small spark in the midst of chaos, which promised changes that were still unknown to both of them. The dust raised during the fight gradually settled, leaving behind the smell of burning soaked earth and spilled sweaty energy. The gang disappeared over the horizon, as if disappearing into the hot air, but the tension still did not leave the settlement space. Every tree, every sagging fence seemed to witness the recent chaos. James stood motionless, slowly lowering his weapon. His muscles were still tense, ready for another attack, but now that tension was mixed with an unusual sense of relief. He felt strangely dependent on someone who had just intervened in his life. A quiet surprise arose inside. She is not only brave, she is smart, fast, independent. His gaze slid over Ayanna's figure, noting her every movement, light, confident, almost feline. Ayanna stayed close, not letting down her guard. Her heart was still pounding with adrenaline, but now a different feeling settled in her chest, a faint but persistent curiosity. He's different, not like the others, she thought, analyzing his posture, his reaction, those barely noticeable gestures that betrayed inner strength. She felt a strange desire to understand who he really was, hidden behind the mask of a silent cowboy. Their eyes met for a moment. There was more to those eyes than just gratitude for being saved. James felt a slight tremor from an unknown feeling, from the thought that there might be a person nearby with whom he could share not only danger, but also something deeper. Ayanna felt the same mixture of anxiety and interest, as if a quiet but tangible union was forming between them. The world around them was still tense. Several residents were cautiously peering over the fence, assessing whether the bandits would return. But for James and Ayanna, it was the background noise. The main thing was the inner feeling that their paths had not crossed by chance, and that this meeting would forever leave a mark on their lives. James mentally weighed the consequences. He could lose his peace, but at the same time he felt that for the first time in a long time someone had challenged his habitual isolation. Ayanna, in turn, was aware that her freedom could be in danger, but she couldn't ignore the strange attraction that had arisen between them. Slowly, they began to move away from each other, but even this movement was filled with tension and quiet mutual recognition. They still do not trust, but they already feel an inextricable connection. A premonition of future challenges was in the air, new dangers, new conflicts, and perhaps the need to act together. The chapter ended with a quiet tension in which every internal monologue was intertwined with expectation. James thought that perhaps for the first time he had met someone for whom he was willing to take risks, and Ayanna felt that her path had crossed with a man who could change her life. They both knew that this was just the beginning, and there were even more dangerous challenges ahead that would require trust, courage, and cunning. Evening was falling to the ground, coloring the rocks and shrubs with warm shades of gold and orange. The shadows of the sparse trees stretched in long strips across the parched soil, creating the illusion of movement, even though it was almost empty. In the gorge, the air was dry, every step underfoot sounded like the crunching of stones, and a light wind lifted dust that swirled in the rays of the setting sun. James moved cautiously, feeling the weight of his weapon and the alertness of every nervous muscle. His gaze scanned the horizon, listening for rustles, for the thud of hooves in the distance, for any change in the sound of the wind. Anxiety still smoldered inside him. The experience of the war had taught him that danger lurked in such silence. He thought about trust, about how much he could rely on a stranger who suddenly intervened in a fight. Could she be an ally, or is this just another trap? Ayana walked beside him, like a shadow among the stones. Her long dark hair blended into the evening light, and her thin braids twitched slightly with every movement. She listened to the whisper of the wind, trying to sense the approaching danger. Fear and cautious curiosity were mixed inside her. This white man is unpredictable and strong, but his eyes betray an honesty that is rarely seen in her life between the tribe and the settlers. Could she trust him if he had already saved her from the gang? Or is it all just a temporary coincidence of circumstances? The footsteps became slower, almost noiseless. They stopped at each ledge of the cliff to explore the space, and in these pauses the tension grew. James felt that every second counted, and at the same time noticed how Ayana confidently moved next to him, balancing caution and determination. Her movement seemed like a dance, a reflection of the freedom he himself had been deprived of. The inner monologues mixed with the outside world. James thought that this moment was a test not only of his strength, but also of his ability to trust. He wondered if he could let someone into his life who was completely different, who lived between worlds he barely understood. Ayana thought that this man could become a guide to a world unknown to her, or just another obstacle. But in his silent confidence and caution, she saw not a threat, but a rare spark of honesty. When the sun had almost disappeared below the horizon, they found a small grove, hiding between rocks and sparse bushes. The wind died down, leaving only the crackling of branches and the light breathing of the night. At that moment, the tension did not go away, it only changed shape. Now it was intertwined with curiosity, with a thin thread of mutual recognition of each other's existence as real, living people, each with their own pain and loneliness. Their movements became almost synchronous, one was checking the path, the other was monitoring the surroundings. No one spoke, but an understanding grew inside both of them. Now they are together against a common threat, and this is what makes them temporary allies, even if their hearts still do not know what this cautious closeness leads to. Night fell on the desert, covering the land with a soft darkness. They lit a bonfire in a small depression between the rocks. The fire crackled, sparks flew to the stars, illuminating faces and creating soft shadows on the stones. The air was cool, but the warmth of the fire enveloped him like a temporary shelter from the brutality of the outside world. James sat leaning against a rock, his eyes focused on the fire, and his thoughts returned to his former life. The war left scars not only on the body, but also in the soul. He recalled the senseless battles, the faces of those who had fallen, and the feeling that justice almost never came on time. Now, sitting next to a stranger, he felt strangely relieved to be able to be just a human being for a while, and not a soldier. But at the same time, there was an uneasy feeling. Could trusting her be dangerous? Ayana was sitting next to him, her long pigtails fluttering slightly in the evening wind. She watched the play of fire on the rocks and recalled her own life between two worlds. The tribe did not accept her as their own, the settlers were afraid and despised. She knew that it was rare to find people who could see behind the exterior of a man with this complicated history. She saw in James not just strength, but honesty, the kind that is so hard to find. An inner monologue whispered, "Is it possible to trust him, or is this just an illusion of security?" At first they sat in silence, listening to the crackling of the firewood and the soft whisper of the wind. Every movement of the shadow seemed to be a sign that the world around them was not stopping watching them. James thought about how unusual it was to be around someone who, despite their differences, understood what it meant to live between boundaries, between the past and the present, between rules and freedom. Ayana, watching his attentive gaze, felt how trust was born in this silence, barely noticeable, but already existing. Gradually, they shared stories. James mentally returned to his years as a soldier, to the loss of friends and to feelings of meaninglessness. He felt the words he had not said before finding their way out in this warm night, and he was surprised at how easily his soul responded to the presence of the girl he had just confided in. Ayana talked about life in the tribe, about how difficult it is to be one's own and someone else's at the same time, about the fear of being misunderstood and judged. Her voice sounded like music in James' mind, and her strong, confident stance commanded respect. In her monologues intertwined with the feelings of the present moment. James reflected, trust doesn't come immediately, but now it's growing like a bonfire inside, warming despite the cold wind of the outside world. Ayana thought that few people are able to see the truth behind masks, and this man is one of them. Sympathy, light and cautious, broke through their inner barriers, slowly but inevitably. The stars, slowly appearing in the night sky, added a sense of infinity. They sat side by side, sharing silence and words, taking their time, allowing the moment to become a small eternity. The internal tension did not disappear, but it softened. The danger of the outside world remained, but here, by the campfire, a bond was emerging that no one could destroy. Even if the future promised new challenges, they were together now, and that was enough to feel the warmth of trust and respect. The warmth of the campfire flickered, casting soft shadows on the faces, tired and tense, but now with a touch of trust. James sat slightly leaning forward, his gaze never leaving the fire, as if each spark reflected memories of the past. He allowed himself to be not just a cowboy, not just a guard of people, but a man with scars on his soul, with pain, with disappointment in people in the world. Every movement of his fingers running over the hilt of the weapon was a reminder of the battles he no longer wanted to fight, of the friends he had lost, of the brutality he could not accept. Ayanna was sitting next to him, her long pigtails gently touching her shoulders, and her inner anxiety was reflected in their swaying. She allowed herself to open up so completely for the first time. Her inner monologue reminded her of how often she was a stranger in both places, in the tribe, where her freedom seemed like treason, and among the settlers, where she was seen only as a savage. Now that she was with James, she felt strangely relieved to be herself, not hiding her vulnerability or her fears. James understood that strength was not in weapons or reaction speed, but in the ability to show his humanity. He was thinking about how rare it is to see people who are willing to see real pain behind an external mask. And in this quiet exchange of stories, in the soft light of the campfire, he felt that Ayanna was able to understand him without words. Ayanna noticed how his eyes sometimes become heavy with memories, how his shoulders are tense with fatigue, how his lips tighten when he thinks about losses. She knew that despite his harsh exterior, he harbored a fragility inside that he rarely showed to the world. Inwardly, she compared this with her own feelings. She harbors the pain of loneliness and the fear of being misunderstood. It was this similarity, vulnerability hidden under the mask of strength, that became the bridge between them. The inner monologues intertwined. James thought that for the first time after a long time he could trust another person. Ayanna reflected that she had met someone who could see her for real, and not for what she should seem. The fire continued to crackle, as if emphasizing the intimacy of the moment. They weren't in a hurry to talk, but every look, every movement was full of meaning. A cautious sympathy was born inside, mixed with respect, understanding and quiet joy that someone next to him understands pain and loneliness. The wind blowing through the rocks reminded them of the outside world, full of dangers, but here, by the campfire, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable. It was as if time had slowed down for a moment, and both felt that they were closer to each other in their humanity than they could have imagined. Even if tomorrow brought new challenges, they were together now, two people, each with their own pain, each seeking understanding. The warm firelight played on their faces, making every curve and shadow seem softer, almost intimate. James noticed how Ayanna was slightly bending over, adjusting her pigtails, and for a moment his gaze lingered on her face. He couldn't afford to feel it openly, but something inside was pulling him closer, like an invisible thread of attraction. Every movement of Ayanna, even the simple brushing of dust from his clothes, caused him a strange excitement. Ayanna felt the same way. She noticed how James's shoulders relaxed slightly as they exchanged stories, how his gaze sometimes searched for her in the dark, how her own hand involuntarily touched his fingers. The moment seemed random, but inside she felt something more, a rare closeness that could hardly be described in words. She knew that such a union was impossible in their worlds, that danger, prejudice and cultural differences stood between them, but emotions made their way through these walls carefully, like the first rays of the sun through the morning mist. Laughter, soft and rare, broke through between the stories, and both were surprised at how easy it sounded next to the other person. James found himself wanting to hear more, to be there for her, to watch her gestures, to feel the warmth of her presence. Ayanna felt the same way, and in this silent play of glances and casual touches, there was a feeling that neither of them could name out loud. Every touch was light, almost casual, but meaningful. James understood that this is an attachment that does not seek immediate consequences, but only allows you to be real with someone who understands. Ayanna, in turn, appreciated these moments, the opportunity to be vulnerable and at the same time strong, next to a man who did not judge her for her courage and freedom. Internal monologues intertwined with external actions. James thought that such intimacy could be dangerous, but an inner voice could not keep interest in Ayanna. Ayanna reflected that affection and admiration are dangerous, but it is impossible to ignore the attraction that arises between them. The bonfire continued to crackle, creating a soft, slightly tense atmosphere where every glance and every touch acquired a special meaning. The The world beyond this small stage existed, but now time seemed to slow down, and both felt a moment in which a cautious but real sympathy was born, a harbinger of the fact that their destinies would be intertwined more than they could have imagined. Night had finally descended on the gorge, and the world around them seemed both quiet and full of hidden menace. The bonfire cast a soft, warm light on their faces, highlighting shadows and lines that seemed both familiar and alien. James sat next to Ayanna, feeling her presence not only physically, but also internally, as if her courage and independence poured into him, filling the void that the war had left in his soul. Ayanna stared at the stars, allowing herself a rare sense of peace. She knew that outside of this small grove, the world was full of dangers, that the gang might return, that her tribe and settlement would never fully accept her. But here and now, with James by her side, she felt like she could be herself. Their silence was filled with mutual understanding, without the need for words. Internal monologues were tightly intertwined with external feelings. James thought that this short respite could be the last calm moment before the storm, but he did not want to lose it. Ayanna reflected that their paths so far intersect only in this area of life, but the already nascent trust and sympathy can change everything if they are careful. The warmth of the campfire touched their hands and faces, and their eyes, fixed on the shimmering sky, reflected both admiration and anxiety. They understood that they were together now, but tomorrow could bring new challenges. Their union was still unofficial, but the solidity of this moment made them feel stronger than they did alone. The sky seemed endless, and every star reminded of the possibility of choice and the openness of the future. James thought that sometimes meeting the right person can change the direction of life, even if the circumstances are hostile. Ayanna understood that the courage to be around someone who was different from everyone else could be the beginning of something more than just survival. The bonfire continued to crackle softly, and their figures, illuminated by the soft light, seemed to be two outcasts who had temporarily found each other in a world where trust and intimacy were rare. At the end of the day, they didn't know what the morning would bring, but at that moment, openness and mutual support gave them strength and hope. The future remained uncertain, but together they felt that they were capable of facing any challenges, and their joint confrontation with danger was just beginning. The shadows of the evening sun stretched along the narrow path as James and Ayanna carefully made their way between the rocks. Every rustle of the wind, every crack of a dry branch made my heart beat faster. James kept looking around, assessing the menacing silhouettes of trees and rocks, and his mind kept returning to one question: would they be able to outflank all the pursuers who seemed to sense their every step? Ayanna moved beside him, nimble and quiet, as if she were integrated into the environment. Her eyes darted quick glances along the path and the tops of the rocks, feeling every rustle and every movement. Fear and determination were mixed inside her, the fear of being caught, the determination to protect someone who had suddenly become important. James thought about how fragile this moment of trust was. Every step they took was a risk, every stop a chance to be noticed. A strange feeling of dependence on Ayanna grew inside him, the one he had previously considered alien and incomprehensible. Ayanna felt the same way. She knew that they had nowhere to retreat to, and that their fates were now intertwined in this dangerous dance. Fear merged with surprise, the surprise that the heart can trust so quickly, even when the mind tells otherwise. They moved in silence, but every glance and every barely noticeable gesture created an invisible bond, as strong as a rope stretched over a precipice. The fear was high, but there was also a strange confidence in it. Together they had a chance. The tribal camp appeared on the horizon, the smoke of campfires rising into the sky, mixing with the light evening dust. Ayanna slowed her pace, feeling the tension tightening in her chest. Her tribesmen had already noticed her return, and the gazes directed at her were filled with suspicion and condemnation. The elders stood at the center of the camp, their gestures and clenched jaws conveying more than words. Ayanna's trust in the stranger had become a threat to the foundations of the tribe. Every step along the camp trail seemed like a test to her, as if the ground itself was testing whether it could withstand this pressure. Ayanna felt an inner conflict that tormented her more than any physical ordeal. My heart ached for James, for the sense of security and respect he gave, but my duty to the tribe weighed on me with equal force. Her mind was looking for an excuse, and her body was longing for freedom. James, beside her, also felt the tension. He noticed the stares, cold and incredulous, that were directed at him. He understood that this was no less a test for Ayanna than for himself. A strange, almost painful feeling was growing inside. They ended up together, but their bond defied everything they knew about the world. Every movement in the camp, every rustle of leaves or stomp of feet sounded like a warning. But amidst this discontent and suspicion, a quiet feeling was emerging, a feeling that promised to be stronger than hostility and prejudice, if only they could preserve it. The early morning shrouded the settlement in a soft light, but the atmosphere inside was icy. Residents gathered at the main square, their gazes sliding over James as if he were an outsider who had crossed an invisible line. He could feel their tension, every whisper of his protection from Ayanna echoing in his chest. He walked slowly, assessing the reactions, hearing hidden criticism behind his back. He cares too much about the savage. Not our man. No words were needed, their looks and gestures spoke louder than any speech. James felt a loneliness that even his habitual self-confidence did not soften. Irritation and bitterness grew inside. The injustice of the world seemed to be a reality where everyone had to choose a side, and he chose the truth, regardless of prejudice. He reflected on his principles, on what it means to be strong and honest when others are ready to judge for no reason. Ayanna walked beside him, but there was an invisible boundary between them. She understood that their union aroused suspicion not only of the tribe, but also of strangers, an alien world in which James was trying to defend justice. Their closeness and mutual trust remained a secret that no one was supposed to see. With each step, the feeling of isolation intensified, but with it grew a quiet, barely perceptible determination. They would stay close, despite the hostility of others, and would fight to protect each other. The shadow above them was gathering from all sides. Ayanna's tribe looked askance, condemning her every move, and the settlers whispered behind James' back, suspecting him of a traitor. Even the air seemed tense, as if the earth itself was rejecting them. Their gang's pursuit did not stop. Every rustle and crack of a branch made their hearts beat faster. But in this chaos, they found each other with their eyes, feeling an invisible connection in the silence between the steps. James thought that his old life was over, that the world he was sure of was destroyed, but next to Ayanna, he felt at least an illusion of meaning. Ayanna reflected on her inability to fit into any of the worlds. The tribe won't accept her choice, the settlement doesn't trust her, and this man, whom she met by chance, became an unexpected support. She felt that together they were stronger than any threat, even if the world around them was hostile. The internal dialogue between the two was like a silent prayer. You can't be ordinary, you can't live as before, but you can be together in this strange, harsh world, clenching your fists and watching the danger that creeps up from every side. Their isolation from society became the link that strengthened trust and sympathy, making the union necessary, though impossible. The sun had almost disappeared below the horizon, and evening shrouded the valley in long shadows. The wind gently stirred the grass, kicking up dust in light swirls, as if the world itself was warning of an approaching storm. James and Ayanna found a small rocky outcrop where they could sit down and catch their breath, looking around the surroundings. Thoughts of the upcoming trial seethed inside everyone. James felt fatigue and anxiety intertwined with an unusual sense of security next to her. His inner voice repeated that they were both on edge, but together they could withstand more than alone. Ayanna, leaning against the stone, felt both fear and confidence. Her thoughts returned to the tribe and the settlement. She would not find complete peace there or here, but next to James there was a feeling that, despite the world that rejected them, they could create their own fortress of trust. The silence of the evening gave space for reflection. The danger did not go away, it only retreated for a while, but the alliance that had arisen between them only strengthened. Their gazes met for a moment longer than usual, and in these silent exchanges of emotions, a new confidence was born. No matter how harsh the world was, they could face any challenge together. The end of the chapter left a feeling of shaky hope and a premonition of a future struggle, where the alliance of James and Ayanna would become their main weapon and at the same time their weak point. The rocks stretched around like sharp teeth of the earth, and a narrow path meandered between them, as if nature itself wanted to detain the fugitives. James felt his heart pounding in his chest, and every step felt like a hammer in his legs. The wind tore dry branches from the trees, the noise of which was mixed with the sounds of pursuers, someone's footsteps, crunching stones, short screams. Ayanna walked beside him, her gaze alert, her hands ready to defend herself, but her eyes betrayed her inner tension. She thought about the tribe, about how her every move could be her last, and at the same time about James, whose determination and resilience made her heart beat faster. Suddenly, one of the bandits jumped out from behind a tree. James managed to get between the threat and Ayanna, but a sharp blow grazed his shoulder, not fatally, but the pain cut, piercing his body and mind at the same time. He felt the blood slightly soaking his shirt, and the thought of his own vulnerability sent a chill through him. Ayanna instantly moved closer, assessing the wound and the tension in his body. His gaze met hers, a mixture of anxiety, understanding, and silent recognition. They both depended on each other now, and every wrong step could cost their lives. James's inner dialogue revolved around one thought: if I fall, who will protect her? And Ayanna thought, we can't lose each other. Not now, not later. The rocks and trees became not only a shelter, but also a trap. Every step required calculation, every movement was a struggle for survival. Their hearts were beating in unison with anxiety and adrenaline, making them feel like life was a thin thread that held them together. Ayanna crouched down next to James, gently feeling his shoulder. Her every move was precise and confident, like someone who was used to operating in extreme conditions. She soaked the edges of her shirt in a stream of water and carefully bandaged the wound, trying not to cause unnecessary pain. Anxiety and something new were bubbling inside her at the same time, a strange, barely perceptible warmth that she felt next to him. James felt her every move as if touching his own vulnerability. Previously, he was used to loneliness, to pain and fear, which he kept to himself, but now he realized that trusting Ayanna had become natural for him. He saw how her fingers acted confidently, how her gaze assessed the situation, as if she could anticipate a threat before it appeared. Her heart was pounding faster, but at the same time, her sense of security was growing. He thought about how strange, and scary, and comforting, it was to trust someone completely. Ayanna, in turn, listened to his every sigh, every gesture, and realized that she could not afford to lose him. In this brief, tense moment, when the world around them remained dangerous, an invisible thread of trust appeared between them, connecting the two on the verge of danger. The wind carried the sound of the bandits retreating, but even that couldn't distract them from the feeling that was slowly but surely growing between them. Every glance, every light touch of hands, every careful gesture of care became the beginning of what could grow into something more. And they both knew that in this threat, in this closeness, their bond was getting stronger, and their feelings were getting brighter. James felt his pulse quicken as their eyes met. There was a flicker of anxiety in his eyes, mixed with an amazing warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time. Ayanna approached slowly, her every step careful but determined, as if she understood that this moment might be the only one, and she couldn't miss it. Her fingers touched his arm, and this light, almost casual contact made him shudder, realizing how much she was important to him. He caught her every look, every hint of emotion that she couldn't, or didn't want to, put into words. My heart was beating louder, my breathing was racing, and my mind was screaming at the same time. We can't afford to be weak, and whispered, but I can't break away. Ayanna felt the same way. The fear of the threat and impossibility of the future, of a world that would not accept their union, was mixed with an attraction that was stronger than any reason. She allowed herself to briefly forget about everything except the feeling of his closeness, the warmth of his body, and the security he carried. And then, almost like an impulse, almost like a forced determination, their lips touched. It was a moment of silence in the midst of chaos, a moment that spoke more than words, recognition of each other's importance, trust and attraction that could not be ignored. Their hearts beat in unison, aware of the risk but unwilling to back down. Every breath, every light contact, every look after, everything was filled with the realization that in this moment they had found what they had been waiting for a long time, and at the same time, something that could cost them too much. But now, here, they allowed themselves to feel. Twilight shrouded the rocky path, casting long shadows on the rocks and sparse trees. James and Ayanna sat next to each other, feeling each other's warmth, but there was anxiety in the air. Every rustle of the wind, every crackle of a dry branch, was a reminder that the danger had not gone away. Bandits, disgruntled tribesmen, suspicious settlers. James's inner voice whispered, "We can't afford to relax. Love is a luxury that can cost too much." But his heart was drawn to Ayanna, to her warmth, to the certainty that they were stronger together than alone. He caught her gaze, brief and full of understanding, and realized that every moment spent together was more valuable than any safe distance. Ayanna felt the same contradictory flow of emotions. My heart was pounding with attraction and fear at the same time. She understood that this alliance could cause hatred and a break with her tribe, but at the same time, the feeling of closeness, the opportunity to trust and be understood seemed worth any risks. They both stared silently at the twilight, at the spreading shadows, at the setting sun, which seemed to warn them that their journey was just beginning, and there was a struggle ahead. But now they appreciated this moment, when fear and love intertwined, creating a strange feeling of strength and vulnerability at the same time. James crouched behind a wide rock, checking the bolt of the rifle and clicking the bolt, as if the rhythmic sound calmed the trembling in his hands. His gaze swept over the sparse trees and bushes, noting every rustle, every movement swaying in the wind. His heart was beating faster, and he knew that this could be their last battle. But the sense of responsibility for Ayanna bent his back more evenly, forced him to hold his head high and not give in to panic. "We can't lose. No way. She deserves me to be strong." Ayanna carefully tested the bow, shooting her eyes along the horizon lines, feeling the tension build up by the minute. Her fingers slid over the arrows, as if stroking old friends who could save their lives. Fear and determination mixed inside her heart. I can't afford to panic. But if he's something, I won't forgive myself. They exchanged glances full of tacit agreement and trust. Not a word, not an unnecessary movement, just understanding. Together they will have to withstand this assault. The wind stirred the grass, rustled in the branches of the trees, and every sound seemed to be a harbinger of danger. James and Ayanna felt their hearts merging in a single rhythm, fear and determination, anxiety and confidence. They were ready for what lay ahead, and they knew that together they could withstand any threat, no matter how deadly it might be. The open field in front of the settlement breathed anxiety, the grass rustled in the wind, and smoke from bonfires and smoke torches hung in a low pall. James and Ayanna stood at the edge of the field, feeling that every movement, every sound could predict the enemy's approach. Their eyes met, a tacit agreement stronger than any words. James felt the weight of responsibility weighing on his shoulders. His mind was going over possible strategies, assessing the odds, and at the same time his heart was beating faster at the sight of Ayanna next to him. We can't afford to split up. No one can save her better than me. And no one can save me better than her. Ayanna swallowed her anxiety, feeling an inner conflict between her duty to the tribe and her inevitable attachment to James. We cannot trust the opinions of others. But if we want to survive, I have to be with him. All my life, or at least this night. They cautiously moved forward, exchanging short, almost invisible signals. Every step strengthened their union, every movement together, every glance at each other, every moment of joint control over the situation made them one. The wind played with Ayanna's hair, and the dust rose under her feet, creating the feeling that the field and the circumstances themselves were becoming their allies. Inwardly, they both understood that ordinary life was impossible, but fighting together was their chance, albeit a deadly one. The first shot cut through the silence, causing James to instinctively flatten himself against the stone. My heart was pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest, and adrenaline was coursing through my veins, sharpening every feeling. Ayanna is nearby, her breathing is steady but tense, and her hands are confidently holding the bow, ready to shoot at any moment. James estimates the distance to the enemy, calculates trajectories in possible hiding places. Every step, every movement is a matter of life and death. I can't afford to make a mistake. She's more important than me. I have to be precise and fast. Ayanna feels a jolt of anxiety, but she doesn't panic. We must act as one. He's my rock, I'm his. No one can survive alone. Her gaze crosses his, and in silence they exchange intentions, without words, without pauses. The sounds of gunfire, screams and whistling bullets create chaos, but the heroes act smoothly. They dodge, change positions, repel attacks. Inside each of them, fear and determination are fighting, the desire to survive and the need to protect the other. Every moment they look at each other strengthens the bond, making the union stronger than any weapon. Dust, smoke, and the smell of gunpowder mixed in the air as James and Ayanna fended off one attack after another in a coordinated manner. Every shot, every lunge, and every dodge required the utmost concentration, but there was no distance between them anymore. Movements became mirrored, breathing became a single rhythm. James felt his heart constrict with adrenaline and fear, but fear was secondary. She's right here. As long as we're together, no one will get through. I will protect her at any cost. Every moment, he noticed how Ayanna confidently retreated and counterattacked, her lithe figure gliding between the stones like a shadow. Ayanna thought about him as keenly as she thought about her goal. He's taking the same risk as me. We are one. If he falls, I won't be able to stop. There was fire in her eyes, but it reflected both concern and apprehension. When one of the opponents broke through too close, James rushed forward, covering Ayanna, and at the same time she fired accurately at the target. The hearts of the heroes beat in unison, fear and determination mingled, but their alliance strengthened. Every moment of danger felt like a confirmation that they were inseparable. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for another, and this feeling made them invincible in this chaotic storm. When the last shot died down and the dust began to settle on the rocks and the ground, James and Ayanna remained standing together, breathing heavily, with wounds and traces of battle on their bodies and faces. The world around them seemed both quieter and more dangerous, the echoes of the battle still hung in the air, a reminder that danger never completely disappears. James felt tired, but with it came relief. We did it. She's right here. There are no more enemies between us. But tomorrow everything can change. His eyes searched for Ayana, and he saw the same feeling in her gaze, a mixture of fatigue, joy, and quiet fear for the future. Ayana felt the warmth of his presence even through her fatigue and pain. We are together. And that's the main thing. Even if the whole world is against us, we will survive. But what will happen tomorrow? No one knows. She touched his shoulder with her hand, and this gesture replaced the words that were too risky or unnecessary. They stood surrounded by destruction, but with a sense of inner unity that no one and nothing could destroy. Their paths had crossed forever now, and everyone knew that there were still many challenges ahead, but they were no longer alone. The wind stirred the dust and hair, reminding them of the uncertainty of the future, and in this fickleness they found a strange calmness, together. If you want, I can immediately prepare a detailed promo for Leonardo AI in order to generate the final moment scene with the correct appearance of James and Ayana, romantically and dynamically. James stood on the outskirts of the settlement, feeling the crumbled dust and charred remains of the barricades under his feet. The wind rustled softly in the tall grass, bringing the smell of gunpowder and scorched earth. He watched as Ayana gently helped one of the wounded, covering him with a cloak and calming his trembling breathing. Relief and fatigue mixed in James' chest. The battle was over, but the price was too high. An inner voice told him it was a miracle that they were both alive, but it instantly reminded him of every shot, every blow, and how easily they could have lost each other. Ayana seemed tired, but her eyes shone with determination. Her look said that the danger was not over yet, that they had survived this ordeal together, and that meant the most. James felt strangely heavy and light at the same time. He thought about how much more destruction the next battle could bring, and realized that the main thing now was to be with Ayana, to support her, to feel her strength and fragility at the same time. Here, among the ruins and ashes, they found a small island of life on which they could still breathe, and even smile, despite all the horror. Although the sounds of battle had died down, the echo of alarm remained in every rustle, in every billowing cloud of dust. James understood that their experiences had changed them both forever, and that this night, this dawn, would be remembered as the boundary between their former lives and a new, unknown, but already their common destiny. Ayana stood in the center of the camp, feeling the cold stares of her fellow tribesmen piercing her like needles. Their silent condemnation felt like a heavy weight weighing down on their shoulders more than any weapon. Every movement, every look of James caused her to have an internal conflict. The desire to be with him collided with the inviolable laws of the tribe. Ayana's inner voice was torn between duty and passion. She knew that her relationship with James violated tradition, that her actions could be a betrayal to her own people. Her heart ached. She couldn't ignore his presence, his determination, and his support, but she also knew that the tribe would never accept her choice. James stood nearby, feeling the tension of the camp. He saw Ayana clench her fists, restraining her emotions, and felt the weight of responsibility. He wanted to get her out of here, to escape the disapproving stares together, but he also understood, it's their small victory that they survived the battle, and that their bond has already become something that can't be ignored. The tribe remained cold, and every step Ayana took next to James seemed to leave traces of unforgiven misconduct. A mixture of anger and sadness flared up inside her, anger at the injustice, sadness at the impossibility of being accepted in the place where she was born. But with every glance at James, she realized that their union was worth the pain, albeit with painful consequences. James walked slowly along the trail leading to the ranch, feeling the weight of every step. The wind gently stirred the dry grass, and the sunset painted the horizon in muted shades of orange and purple. He thought about home, about the settlers, about what had once seemed familiar and safe. But now it seemed alien, almost unattainable. Every time he looked at Ayana, he was reminded that ordinary life was impossible for him, just as it was for her. Ayana walked beside him, carefully leaning on her cane after a recent injury, feeling the cold silence of the evening. She felt like a stranger in two worlds at the same time. The tribe rejected her, and her presence seemed out of place among the settlers. Every sound, every rustle disturbed her, as if reminding her that their union was a rarity and at the same time a challenge to fate. Internal monologues intertwined with the surrounding atmosphere. James thought about the freedom he was looking for, the impossibility of returning to his former existence, the fact that his heart was now tied to Ayana and the risks they had endured together. Ayana reflected on her choice, that being with him meant abandoning the familiar world, accepting danger and unpredictability. But at the same time, she felt the warmth that filled her heart, the certainty that there was someone nearby who shared her fate. The silence of the evening, the shimmer of sunset light and the slight rustle of the wind created the feeling that the world around them had slowed down to let them know that their paths were now inseparable, and normal life was just a memory they had left behind. The road in front of them stretched, gently winding through golden hills bathed in the warm light of sunset. James walked next to Ayanna, their movements merging into a single rhythm, light leaning on each other, confident but careful steps. Every hill, every blade of grass seemed to be part of a new beginning, opening up a horizon where one could not look in advance. James' inner monologues were both disturbing and peaceful. He understood that his usual life was behind him, but next to Ayanna he felt strength and purpose. His thoughts returned to the trials they had gone through together, to the fear and pain, to the moments of trust and intimacy. And now, as he walked into the sunset, he realized that any difficulties would be overcome as long as they were together. Ayanna walked beside him, feeling the warmth of his hand, the touch of his shoulder, the rhythm of his steps. Conflicting emotions raged inside her, sadness that the tribe had rejected her, anxiety about the unknown future, and at the same time, the calm certainty that this union gave her the strength to move on. She felt like every breath, every movement connected them even more tightly, as if the world around them had slowed down, leaving only the two of them in the road ahead. The wind played with Ayanna's dark pigtails, the sunset light dyed her skin and hair in soft golden red hues, and the shadows of the hills stretched along the road, creating a feeling of infinity. Every step, every thought about the future was both unknown and desired, because ahead of them was a life full of trials, discoveries and opportunities, but now they were together. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, flooding the sky with golden, orange, and purple hues. James and Ayanna walked across the prairie, their silhouettes blending into the fiery palette of the sunset, lost against the background of the endless road. Every step was filled with slight fatigue and quiet relief, but inside there was anxiety. There was no clear path ahead, only endless possibilities in the unknown. James reflected that a normal life among the settlers was now impossible, and although the future was uncertain, next to Ayanna he felt that he could go through any ordeal. His thoughts were torn between the danger they had already endured and the hope that their union would give them the strength to move forward. Ayanna walked beside him, feeling the touch of his hand and the warmth of his presence. Inside her, longing for the tribe and the confidence that together they could cope with any difficulties were mixed. She caught every glimmer of sunset light on the grass, on her hair, on James, realizing that although there was no certainty ahead, this moment was theirs, entirely. The wind gently stirred the grass, bringing the smells of the prairie, and each step seemed both a farewell to the past and the beginning of a new path. The silhouettes of the two dissolved into the sunset lights, leaving a feeling of infinity and the possibility of continuation, where the story is not finished, but only moves on to the next day, full of hope and uncertainty. Through dusty sunsets and the vast expanses of the Wild West, we guided these heroes through danger, fear and love. Their path was not easy, and we went through every victory and every defeat together. Thank you for being there, watching their story and feeling every moment. If you enjoyed this trip, please like us, leave a comment with your impressions and subscribe so that you don't miss new stories. The Wild West is full of mysteries and tragedies, and there are even more dramatic, exciting and romantic events ahead of us, which we will discover with you. This is where the story of James and Ayanna ends, but their spirit continues to walk through the sunsets, reminding us that even in a world full of danger, there is a place for courage, trust and love.